Hi, how are you?
Nice
Nice to see you.
Yes.
Nice to see you. Hi, everybody.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Edwards, the board has a series of questions to ask you. Some of these will be familiar because I think you were asked the last time. We have about an hour, so we'll go to 7:10. So your answers can be as long as you wish, or some of the questions may be shorter. After each question is asked, the board will have follow-up questions, or may have follow-up questions, and we'll move on to the next one. And if you have any questions of us, we can make this a dialogue too.
Great.
So the first one, I want to thank you for being interested in our community. We really appreciate that. Could you just take a few minutes to tell us why you applied to be Great Barrington's town manager, and if chosen, why you believe you would be a successful town manager here?
Well, I would start off by saying that I wouldn't apply to just any town to be a town manager. I think Great Barrington is a unique town with a special place and role in the Berkshires as the anchor of South Berkshire. It is a town obviously steeped in history with a tremendous number of assets to offer both its residents and residents in surrounding communities as a place to live, work, and play. So I guess the easiest way to answer the question is why wouldn't, if you were interested in town management, why wouldn't you want to be a town manager in Great Barrington? Because it truly is a remarkable community and a thriving community. And I do believe when I talk about the role of Great Barrington, we all know the population challenges of the Berkshires and all of Western Massachusetts, et cetera. Great Barrington has an opportunity to really be a calling card for people to want to locate here in Great Barrington and in surrounding communities and reverse that population trend and breathe economic life into the region. So it's an exciting opportunity for me. And again, I wouldn't apply to just any town to be its town manager. So it's a really unique opportunity. Why I think I would be a good town manager is because I have been a select board member in a community on I-91 for 15 years. I take that back. It'll be 15 years in about 2 months. We are a small town with big town opportunities and challenges, being right on 91. We are experiencing growth because of the actions that we've taken to grow a community both commercially and residentially in a smart, logical way, as opposed to just putting out a for sale sign on the town saying come one, come all. But really understanding what the vision is for the town and how to get to that vision. And I think that's important. I am a communicator. I love doing this. And I think a town manager needs to be able to check boxes in terms of delivery of services, but communication is at the epicenter of that, and understanding how to suggest vision, but also apply the vision of select board members and apply the vision of town residents and bring people together in a collaborative model. And you run the risk of sounding very biased and confident, and you're overly confident in your answers. But my whole career has been based upon collaborative stakeholder relationships, bringing people together, finding common ground, finding compromise, and making sure that the vision is realized. And I'm very good at that, and I take pride in that because of my ability to do this. My understanding of town government, my understanding of codes, and my understanding, and I don't pretend to know it all. And I think that's actually one of my strengths, is I'm not afraid to say, I don't get that at all. What are you talking about? Those are the reasons that I'd be good at being a town manager. I'm passionate about government service and service delivery to residents. It is something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's why I have aggressively always looked to tackle the challenges and the opportunities presented, because you're in a role to maximize success. You're not in a role just so you can say you're in that role. So I could go on and on, but I won't, because I tend to go on and on sometimes, and I don't want to do that. So that's sort of a thumbnail, but again, if you want more, I can give you more.
I appreciate that. Any follow-up questions? Ed, you're next.
Yeah, the next question is about leadership style, with some particulars, both internal with the staff, but then external with the community, and I suppose if you're in the mood, you could throw us in as well.
Okay. Well, let's start with the staff, since I just met with them from 4 to 5 o'clock, which was a very enjoyable experience. All of them coming at the meeting from their lens, in whatever role they have with the town, from conservation to clerk to council on aging, et cetera, et cetera. My leadership style is to empower people to tap into their skills and to what excites them to get out of bed in the morning, to make them understand that they're a vital piece of success, and to help them understand that as much as I sometimes will drone on and on and on, unfortunately, I am a very good listener, and I want to tap into their skill sets and their experiences. I was telling them an anecdote of having been through 14 town meetings. There's never been a town meeting where I haven't looked at the town administrator, or even a department head that's in the audience, more than once, saying it's your turn to make me look smart, because they have so much to offer. The highway guy knows more about running a highway department than I do, and he or she should. So I really enjoy tapping into that insight, into that knowledge, and saying, okay, how can we work together to find a solution? The highway person came to me recently and said, hey, let's work together on building a new softball field. It's not in his bailiwick to do that, nowhere close. But I was just like, that is wonderful, because he and I have the kind of relationship where he's gonna come to me, and I had the rec department just because I volunteer for far too many things in town, to find a solution to a challenge that had suddenly posed itself. So my leadership style with staff is to really empower them when decisions are made, not to just say, this is the decision, but explain why, how their input was part of that decision-making process, and to feel like, even if it didn't go their way this time, my listening approach, they're gonna feel like they can come to me again and again and again. With townspeople, I really am looking forward to participating in town. I'm a baseball guy. I love Little League baseball. And I don't know whether Great Barrington's Little League or Cal Ripken, it doesn't really matter.
It's a little late.
Little, okay. Because we're Cal Ripken, and that's okay, and I've run the Cal Ripken League for probably 7 years in my area. But going to Little League games and having conversations with people, I may not stay for the whole game, but to really get a sense of what people are passionate about in town, because they feel like you're really vested in their daily lives, that's great. To have meetings with different people, to have open office hours, to really understand and listen to them, it is important. So I lead by leading, but also by following at times, and knowing when to lead and when to follow. And then with the board, because I have a fair amount of experience as a select board member, understanding, or at least partially understanding, what is going through your minds, what your approach is from the lens of being a select board member, is something that I know how to do, because I've been there, and having constant communication with the 5 of you, to talk about opportunities and challenges. I don't like the word problems, because a problem is a negative. It's a challenge, and you can turn challenges into opportunities. And to learn from your experience, to better understand what's going on in town, and to learn from your lens, because I have a limited lens, and it's gonna be a different lens than the 5 of you do. So my leadership with you guys is to empower you to help me be a better town manager, and hopefully I can help you be a better select board member through that constant interaction.
Any follow-up?
One quick one. Yankees fan or a fan of another?
Don't listen to him.
Don't answer, yeah.
You don't have to
I like
answer
to watch Willie Mays in the 54 series going over his shoulder. You know.
So I've got a kind of a set of questions regarding municipal management skills, and you've answered part of it just now, but, so I'll ask you the first one, and go into the second one. Give us an idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are as far as management skills.
I'll lead with my weakness. I sometimes don't have the patience I wish I did. And it's not necessarily with, well, sometimes it can be with people, but it's with situations that I just don't understand, and that sometimes is translated to people who I am managing or working with. I get frustrated. Let's just do it. Let's just get it done, because I do believe there is a certain benefit and drawback to figuring out as you go sometimes. It has its drawbacks, but it really has a lot of positives to it as well. And I've learned to do that very well because I understand that I don't always have patience with process. A strength of mine, again, and I touched on it before, but I'm going to give an anecdote, and it's a very important anecdote. 5-6 years ago, maybe, even seven years ago, probably as far back as 2011, the town of Whately, which is a small town based upon volunteerism, we were going through a challenge with our emergency response, specifically our ambulance. We had calls that were taking 40-45 minutes for a paramedic to arrive. And that wasn't true just in Whately, it was true in a lot of the surrounding towns, and it continues to be in surrounding towns. And under my direct leadership, I got together with select board members from other communities, specifically the towns of Sunderland and Deerfield, who were having similar problems. Deerfield a little less so because they did have some capacity for paid ambulance staff. But we were all struggling. And we put together, with the help of some regional monies from the COG and the state, we put together a plan to regionalize our ambulance service, to go from volunteer service to one that's 24/7 paramedic level service, which is unheard of in small towns and many larger towns across western Massachusetts. This particular instance, the chief of the ambulance service in Whately was absolutely adamantly opposed to regionalization because he was understandably proud of the work that they had put in for all those years to serve the people of Whately as they had, and to do intercept calls to the extent that they could, and to really be a fundamental piece of why Whately was such a great town to live in, because of that volunteerism, because they all pitched in and worked together, etc. And I knew people who ran the ambulance when it was the back of somebody's station wagon back in the 60s. Now obviously I wasn't there, but I knew them, and those anecdotes ran deep. Eventually, the vote to regionalize our ambulance service to become the first in the state ambulance service that was run by a memorandum of understanding, without one town running it, 3 equal towns regardless of size. It won in town meeting 100 to 5. I mean, it was an amazing victory for it. And the head of the ambulance, Gary Stone, again, got up on town meeting, said I'm against this, everyone should vote against it, etc. But I continued to work with Gary, and as vocally opposed as he was, because he knew that I valued his opinion and his success, I immediately made sure that he was one of 6 members of the Board of Oversight on the newly created South County EMS, even though he was incredibly opposed to it. And now today, we're in our 4th year of operation, 3 or 4 years of operation. He's probably our biggest ally, because we didn't cast him aside saying, sorry, we didn't agree with you, you lost, we won, we're moving on. That's my management style, and I'll take that to my grave.
Okay, good. So the second question in this kind of series is, Can you give us an idea of your experience in collective bargaining?
In a town like Whately with a town administrator, the town administrator is not involved with the collective bargaining. The select boards are involved, and I say select boards because in Whately, the only employee group that is under collective bargaining is our elementary school. And the way schools work, and I don't want to bore you with minutia, but the way our schools work, we are part of a regional school district at the middle school and high school level with the towns of Conway, Sunderland, Deerfield, and Whately. At the elementary school level, we are a supervisory union. So each town has their own elementary school committee, and then there's a Frontier Regional middle school, high school committee, one committee. And on top of that, we have Franklin Tech, which has its own, obviously, their own administrative apparatus with teaching and collective bargaining unit. So the select board members are intimately involved with collective bargaining for each of those schools. Whately Elementary School, both for its teachers and its paraprofessionals. So I've been involved with both of those. And we sort of rotate, so the same person's not doing it over and over and over again. I've been involved with the Franklin Tech collective bargaining, and I've been involved with the high school collective bargaining. Again, not every time it comes around, because it's not effective negotiation. It's not, you just don't, you lose your lens. So I've been intimately involved with it, and sat at tables when I've talked to people about, we can't afford this, and our own attorney says, well, you know, it was set up so that you would have to have overrides sometimes. Well, no, it really wasn't necessarily, but you know, it's collective bargaining, and not everyone even on your team is on the same page. So it's a pretty involved collective bargaining experience.
And what do you feel you bring to the table as a negotiator on behalf of the community?
It's in my DNA, I guess, for better or worse, to be a bridge builder and to find compromise. To put it politically, I'd be a horrible Speaker of the House, because I'm just not that divisive with, it's my way. I look for compromise. So as a negotiator, whether it's collective bargaining or any other issue, I look to the center. I look to find that common ground where we can bring everyone together, because I genuinely believe that collective bargaining, where, and it depends upon how you look at it, everyone's either really happy or everyone's happy or everyone's miserable, is the best success. If there's one group that's happy and one group that's miserable, there potentially are some challenges there. So I think that skill of mine, because I am a communicator, because I do like to have conversations with people as sidebar conversations, and because, and this is going to sound incredibly arrogant, and I apologize for it, because I am told that I can be a presence in the room sometimes, that I can deliver a message to an audience like this, and it resonates, because I say it with conviction, and people trust me because of my delivery and my communication skills, both individually and in group settings. That's what I think I bring.
Actually, I have a follow-up
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
Not to dwell on it, but to go back to you right off the bat knew exactly what your weakness was. And in terms of your weakness, when it is that lack of patience, what tools do you draw on to help you in moments of finding yourself in that place?
I'm pretty good at stepping back,
Okay.
and because I'm so aware of it, and I see it in my son, you know, why do I have to read directions? Well, because you kind of have to. And I get it. I totally get it. But everyone has a weakness, and if anyone tells you they don't have a weakness, that's a weakness. So I rein myself in, and I'm also very good at listening to people. And if someone says, "Whoa, you got to slow down because I didn't do X, Y, or Z," and because visibly was frustrated with the process, I can sit back and say, okay, I don't mind feedback as long as it's constructive. I love constructive feedback, and hopefully it's sort of off to the side and not out and open. So I just have that ability to step back and say, okay, yeah, I gotta remember that.
Thank you. All right, that's me. Great Barrington's goal is to manage its finances in a way that will maintain its AAA bond rating while preventing taxes from becoming a burden to residents. Please describe your role in financial planning in your past positions, as well as your financial management strategies for ensuring organizational sustainability.
I'm very proud of the fact that Whately's excess levy capacity right now is pushing $1 million, which is remarkable for a town to have that kind of excess levy capacity. A small town, and you know, a larger budget, $1 million is like, oh well, you know, so what? But our town budget is about $8 million a year, half school, half town operations. And to have an excess levy capacity of $900+ thousand is, it speaks to the importance to me of delivering town services, the best possible town services, but in a fiscally responsible way. I don't necessarily throw money at a problem, a challenge. I'm not afraid to spend money, but I'm gonna look at all the alternatives first and assess the pros and cons of each of the possible steps towards a solution before the money is spent. I am someone who believes that managed growth is important. Managed growth is why Whately's in the financial position that it is. I remember when I first ran for select board back in 2004, somebody asked me about growth. Because there are a lot of people who don't want to see growth, obviously, and there are some people who want to see a lot of growth. You know, the for sale sign comes out. And I explained to them that I believed in managed growth to maintain the culture of a community, but to stay up with the times, partially because you never want to stagnate, but also because managed growth and increased economic capacity helps you with your financial planning. And that's important to remember. I obviously have been reading a lot about Great Barrington lately, trying to do a little bit of homework. And I think about the fact that Great Barrington has seen some growth, but surrounding communities have not seen that growth. And when surrounding communities don't see similar growth to Great Barrington, specifically ones that are in the school district, it does put a financial strain on a community. It may be an inevitable financial strain, but it is a financial strain. So I want to work with other towns on their financial, not that it's my place to work with them, but we are a region that relies on each other. And so if we can help other communities foster growth in a way that fits their town character, which may be different than the Great Barrington town character, then that's going to help with their finances, and because we're all in this together, that's part of financial management as well. I've run around to a lot of towns. I'm the head of the Franklin County Select Board Association, so I know what the financial situations of towns across Franklin County are, and Hampshire County. And those towns that are up against their 25% cap, it's frightening. What on earth do they do? So I believe in vision. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe you spend money when you need to spend money, but sometimes you just have to say, what else can we do? Because you do have to worry about people on fixed incomes. You do have to worry about people who want to work in Great Barrington and live here, but the taxes are going to be tough. So it's again about that collaborative modeling that I know I beat with a dead horse, but it's important. So it's understanding town accounting and working with collectors and the finance committee and the town accountant so that I always understand where we are and we can plan ahead rather than being reactive, being proactive. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you guys feel as though the question was answered?
Yes,
Okay.
no follow-up? So, can you tell us about any large municipal projects you've managed and what you've learned from those projects?
Well, I guess it would depend upon what you would define as large. But Whately was involved, and it's embarrassing to talk about. Our town government was in 2 different buildings, neither of which were handicap accessible. So we were breaking like 25 ADA laws on a daily basis. And I'm exaggerating that, but I'm trying to make a point that it wasn't effective governance. We went through a process that took several years to build community support around helping them understand that we needed to fix this capital challenge that we have in terms of our municipal buildings, and then what to do with it. So I was closely involved in the design of our historic town hall to be a consolidated office project. What's interesting is that's one of the few battles that I've lost in Whately, and it did not pass a debt exclusion vote. But simultaneous to that, a building in Whately that was purposed for regional library book transfer became available. We purchased that, we renovated that building, and then because the historic town hall was important to the town, or enough people in town, I helped lead the discussion over repurposing that town hall into more of a social community center where the arts would have an opportunity to have concerts and what have you. So we preserved that, and it was a $1.5 million project, which may not seem like a big number, but it was on top of a $3 million project for the relocation of town offices and the renovation of those buildings. So in totality, it was an opportunity to lead a series of capital projects that were all interconnected, by building support across town, by working with people who were opposed, by understanding the challenges of and fiscal limits of certain people, et cetera. So, I've been pretty closely involved in those discussions and monitoring the fiscal realities of that building project, staying as far away from the actual construction blueprints as I could, because I don't know how to build anything, but I know how to manage a project.
So let me follow up with that.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the failed project. I'm kind of an expert in failed projects, so what did you learn from that?
I learned that great things take time, and that just because something doesn't work the first time doesn't mean that there's not a very solid solution. For lack of a better term, solution may not be the best word, but that you stick your tail between your legs and you pout for about a week, and then you say, okay, we still have this challenge. How do we fix it? The town hall issue in Whately tore apart the town. I mean, it absolutely tore apart the town, where good friends didn't talk with each other anymore. And to find a solution that was palatable to everybody, that served the town's needs in terms of coalescing around one office building, making sure we were ADA compliant, all those important things. But on top of that, to understand that big change takes time. Goes to the patience issue. It just takes time, and you don't give up just because it doesn't happen the first time. It may not happen the same way, but you can pivot and really make something really strong out of something. And at the end of the day, it actually brings the town together from the challenges that the town faced earlier on.
Thank you. Any follow-ups?
I might follow up to the
Please.
follow-up, just because we don't really have it here, but I know something that's important to all of us on this board is strategic planning.
Yeah.
And I feel like that falls into a little bit with the finance and with the project management. What kind of skills do you have with strategic planning and then following through on those kind of strategic long-term goals?
Yep. I actually think it's what I enjoy doing most. I think, and forgive me if you don't think these examples will point to this as much as I think it does, but every organization has a strategic plan. They have a long-range vision. The organizations that I've helped run, we knew we had our charter, we had our mission. We also knew that funders expected a return on their investment, et cetera. And that is strategic planning in terms of fulfilling a mission and making sure that your funding is maintained and increased. I'm very proud of understanding how to create a strategic plan that identifies what needs to happen for funding to get off the ground, continue, or increase. To maintain visibility in a community, and I don't necessarily mean a town community, but in a stakeholder community. And understanding who needs to be at the table and how long it's gonna take once you get those people at the table for them to actually like each other. Because strategic plans are all oftentimes involving people who aren't accustomed to sitting at a table together. When I was with the organization Smart Power, we created a strategic plan around visibility and funding and growth. And because of programs that I created and facilitated and led, we won the USDOE's Green Power Pilot Award. We won the US EPA's Clean Air Excellence Award. Those program wins, for lack of a better term, were a key part of a strategic plan and implementing that plan to make sure that funders said, this is a good return on my investment. I'm getting what I expected out of this organization. And visibility increased and communication, so it was part of that iterative process of a strategic plan, and I find it a tremendous amount of fun. My most recent organization, Tech Foundry, in Springfield, which was workforce development for people on the economic sidelines. The strategic plan was to grow jobs and match those jobs with a skill set that was lacking. And because of my work, we won the Associated Industries of Massachusetts Gould Award for workforce innovation. Again, it's part of the strategic plan and implementation of that plan to realize a mission and to increase funding because your mission is being realized. So I really enjoy strategic planning, and I like sitting down and saying, okay, how are we gonna do this? And throwing spaghetti against the wall sometimes. It's sort of it's seat of the pants kind of, in a structured way.
Thank you.
Yeah, the next question is about a 9-part question, so I'm gonna try and consolidate it, which is about economic development. Keep in mind, housing is a huge issue, and housing costs around here, which if you've done any homework, you know. So what's your experience with attracting economic development there? And if you've really done your homework, lay out the economic development plan Great Barrington should have, although that's probably not there yet.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't pretend to go there. But economic development is about understanding your assets, understanding what you don't have, and understanding what you do have. It's about understanding what the town has a stomach for and what the town does not have a stomach for. The example in Whately is that to make sure that nothing big is ever built, the town a long time ago, long before I was involved with the town, said we are not going to have public sewer. Because by definition, that's gonna restrict your growth. There won't be any big whatever. because those big whatevers require things like public sewer. But a town does have an appetite for job growth and company growth that fits within their model. We are a farming community, and so I worked very hard to make Whately a destination place for microbrews. Working with planning and ZBA and the town, I'm sorry, the county building inspectors to create an atmosphere and code that would allow for farm brews to have tasting rooms, because enough of the hops was grown on premises. It may seem small, but it is part of taking advantage of your assets, agriculture being an asset. I've been a leader on introducing, and I hesitate to say this because I'm sure I'm gonna have a couple people saying, you did what? Cannabis is an economic development opportunity. As an agricultural community and having close friends who are farmers who are trying to figure out how to save their farm and have their family stay in farming, working with zoning, working with planning, working with other stakeholder committees and commissions in town, the schools, to take advantage of the economic development potential of cannabis. And now Whately will have, and I'm great, a little bit ahead of this, Whately will have a retail facility in the not too distant future, and we will have 2 or 3 growing facilities in the not too distant future. Whately was at the forefront of putting education as part of our host community agreement with anyone who wants to grow or sell at a retail level. Those are all economic development pieces to get people on the same page for growth. Housing, rather than trying to maximize cost for a school we were trying to sell, we sold it for the king's ransom of $1,000, because we knew that the developer was going to put in 10 units, half of which, and again, in Great Barrington, it doesn't sound like a lot, but in Whately, 5 with someday 8 or 9 low-income housing units is a pretty big deal. Unfortunately, that building's not on a bus route, and there are a lot of challenges with it, which I personally struggle with, because if you're a senior or if you have limited income, you probably should be on a bus route to be able to get to the bank, be able to get to your job, et cetera. But that's neither here nor there. But to make sure that we have housing for people to work at Yankee Candle, which is our largest employer in town in terms of the manufacturing facility, to make sure that they have the ability to attract people, and that housing costs remain low enough. So I've been very involved in being a part of that. There is not a tremendous amount of new business in Whately because of the septic issues and we sit on a bunch of ledge, so you can't, in half the town geographically, you can't really put a business in there. But I've worked very hard to maximize our assets, and we have Quank Farm. We have a lot of things that take advantage of the character. Turning an apple orchard, preserving the growth of apples, and turning it into a wedding venue, and working with people to make sure that our codes and ZBA and planning allow it, that is booked 2 years out now. That's the economic development I've done, and I'm proud of that. So you take advantage of your assets and you plan around your assets to grow how you want to grow in the town.
Since you started on this, we want economic development here, but we don't want a hotel that's bigger than 45 rooms. We want economic development, we don't want solar farms. We want economic development, we don't want cannabis, or a fair number of us don't. How do you, any idea you throw out there, you're going to have pushback from whichever side. How do you deal with that and still come up with economic development?
Well, I don't think that the scenario you just painted is just restricted to economic development. Whatever you throw out there, you're gonna have pro and con sides. And I fear that sometimes is getting magnified in our society as opposed to minimized. But you need to find to the best of not just my ability, but everyone's ability. You need to find compromise. You need to find, okay, if you don't like this, how far would you go? I totally understand the 45 room hotels. It's not the environment of Great Barrington. Again, that's from someone who hasn't paid that much attention to it, and I'm probably having people mad at me for saying that.
Either way, don't worry.
I know. So, but again, if you look at your assets, and I don't think towns truly look at their assets enough, and how to leverage those assets and grow your economic development around those assets, and understand what your growth scenarios are. Do you want, which I've talked about in Whately for all the years I've been a select board member, bringing young families to town. You don't have young families, you don't have a community, long term. You just don't. Economic development that will encourage, I get, you go to college, you wanna go to Boston, New York, or whatever, and you wanna live that life for a while. At some point, you're gonna get tired of that life, or the company you're with that's growing doesn't need to be in Boston or New York anymore, and is looking for a different quality of life, to start raising a family, and to, if you can get the millennials to actually buy a car, they can live out here. And I say that tongue in cheek, but, so understanding what your growth goals are, why do you want to grow? And if you understand why you want to grow and you match it with the character of your town and the assets of your town and what people have the stomach for, are people just gonna say, no, I don't want this, or I would accept this with these caveats? Then you can develop a strategy that, again, you don't have some people who are happy and some people who are sad. You have everyone, or the majority of people, saying, yeah, I can live with this because it's the smartest direction to take, and everyone was listened to, and we're gonna figure out how to minimize what my group feels is the challenge of a 10-room hotel. But, whatever it is. So that's.
Thank you.
As a newcomer to the area, and you're explaining some of the economic challenges of Whately. Obviously, we have different ones here. What would you do to immerse yourself, learn what people see as you're saying, like what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are? What would you do to figure those out, to learn those? My guess would be probably pretty quickly.
I consider myself the boy who can't say no. If I get invited to a meeting, I go. Because you never know what's gonna come out of that meeting. I wanna, and the town may already be a member, I don't know. But I'd make sure that I, was a member of the Rotaries, and I was a member of the Chamber, and I was, and I got in, and I watched and understood the people who are in the education stakeholder group. If you immerse yourself in each stakeholder group and you bring people together and really understand where they're coming from, what the barriers are, as opposed to what the obstacles are, because those are two very distinct things, and to meet with the restaurant groups, or to meet with the precision manufacturing groups, or and understand what they want for their industry, or what they need to thrive as a subset of the Great Barrington economy, then you start to learn. And it's funny, when I said didn't have patience, and I don't oftentimes, those are the things that I really do have patience for. I learned a long time ago that if you think that you're gonna win somebody over, or somebody's all of a sudden gonna be friends with somebody that they have never been friends with before in a first meeting, you're delusional. But I can set the clock to having monthly meetings, and by the 6th or 7th month, people may not be going out for drinks after the meeting with each other, but they've gained an appreciation for each other because they don't see them as the monster anymore. So I want to learn about the dominant economic factors of Great Barrington. I want to learn what the prospects are for new growth in Great Barrington. What the skills, what the market will allow for in terms of workforce for, again, precision manufacturing, because we all know that that's a big deal. For education, you know, I want to know what I'd go up to the college. What's their financial situation right now, in light of all we've heard about small colleges these days and their struggles? Making sure I know what Great Barrington can count on long-term and what it might not be able to count on long-term, and develop that strategy. But I can't give you a more concrete answer this early on. I hope I get the chance to.
No, I wasn't thinking I was gonna get a
Yeah.
concrete answer in terms of what you thought it was. It was more, how would you go about learning, which you did answer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So give or take about 20 minutes.
Okay.
So you touched on this with Watley being a farming community, so my question is related to that. So our farm to table resources are key for Great Barrington to be named as part of Best Small Town in America by Smithsonian Magazine, which came out in 2012? Something
Yes.
like that, yeah. What specifically would you do to support our farmers and grow our thriving food economy?
The farm to table movement is something that we shouldn't be thinking that we've won. I think we've made good progress on that, but there's a lot more to go. I think that as you, and again, some of these things, I'm hesitating only because I don't know what some of these things have already happened. How much of the school's food is farm to table food? And how much is just processed in from Cisco or whatever it is? And I'm not being critical of that, that's just, I don't know the answers to that. But making sure that the restaurant community in Great Barrington maximizes the use of local produce. Making sure that the schools maximize the use of local produce. Not to the extent that all of a sudden their bottom line is adversely impacted, if it would be, but to make sure that there's a strategy around maximizing it to the extent that that works for everybody. Again, creating a regional approach to farm to table as opposed to just a Great Barrington approach to farm to table. I can't emphasize enough how regionally situated I am. When you run a countywide select board association and you understand and you've learned the challenges and the similarities and the goals, there's so much potential that can happen when you not only understand the challenges of Great Barrington or the opportunities of Great Barrington, but the other communities around us. And the farm to table and finding out how we can maximize the farmer's opportunity when the lens grows out a little bit. You know, the schools in Pittsfield or North Adams, I get it's north of here, but what are the other markets for the crops that are produced? I also think that it's very important to make sure that we are friendly to farmers in terms of their crop diversification. You know, and I understand that there's an element in town, and I don't pretend to know big, small, whatever, on the cannabis issue, but we embraced it because of the agricultural community. maximizing that crop diversity, helping farmers understand the power of the internet and the web, because there are a lot of, I know firsthand that there are a lot of people who run a farm and I email with their spouses instead of them because they don't even touch email. And to understand how technology can be an asset to their livelihoods, that's a long sum game, but I think that's a critical part of it as well. It's iterative steps to a solution. We're not gonna find a solution in a month, but I think that what's happened so far has built the foundation to really make the farm to table and whole agricultural community thrive more than it already is.
The question I have is in terms of select board relations, which you've certainly talked on, and policy development. So maybe if you could outline a policy that you've successfully proposed, and it's in, and then in terms of just kind of in elaborating with that, I know for me it's really important, but transparency in government, and then also transparency with the select board. Say we were going to propose something that you thought was really bad for the town, how would you approach us? How would you have that conversation with us?
Very carefully. That's a multi-part question, and I want to be cognizant of the time. And I'm already losing my train of thought a little bit.
Do you want me to? Go
No,
back
that's
to the
all right.
first one?
I'll
Okay,
try.
Sorry.
You can cut me off if I'm going down a path that I wasn't supposed to. Whately's a little different because the town administrator doesn't do any of these things. When I wanted Whately to become a green community, I may not look it, but I bleed climate. And I wanted Whately to become a green community. And the town administrator wasn't gonna push that. That being said, I needed the town administrator skill sets and administrative and organizational capacities to make it a reality. So, and I forget when we became a green community, but it was probably in 2012 maybe. We were probably one of the first 50 in the state. So I pushed that policy. Whately was the first collaborative solarized community in the state. There's no way that a town of 1,500 people could, at that point, I don't know whether it can now, be a solarized community on their own. And rooftop solar on people's homes is a great way to offset electricity costs, if that's what you're so inclined to do. So Whately became a solarized community because we partnered with Chesterfield and Williamsburg. So we had the economies of scale necessary to make that a reality. I pushed that. The creation of the Suffolk County Emergency Management Service was something that my leadership realized. A town administrator helped facilitate it. And I've had really good relationships we've had 4 town administrators, one for just a year, early on, since I've been a select board member. That relationship is critical. And I rarely tell town department heads when they're wrong because they usually are a lot smarter than I am within their area of expertise. I don't tell the highway guy how to plow the streets because why would I do that? So the second part of or the third part of your question about you guys,
Yeah.
I probably would have individual conversations first. That's not to get around transparency, but nobody wants to be called out without knowing they're gonna be called out. Because being called out or being challenged with an idea that maybe somebody may be passionate about or they haven't thought through, without a heads up, it's just not good relationship building. So if I thought something was a really bad idea, I would have one of you guys, whoever it was, walk me through why this is good. I admit, I'm not seeing it yet. I may be missing 5 things that make it a really good idea, but I'm not seeing it yet. And because I have to balance all 5 of you and the town, and, you know, I wanna hear why this was a good idea, and maybe try to talk an individual off a ledge, if I really thought that I was right. But then try to encourage, and then work with the chair to have a constructive conversation if and when the conversation came to this table. But I just don't believe that you are constructive when somebody's told their idea isn't a good one here. And I don't think that's lacking transparency. I think that's actually getting more quickly to transparency and finding consensus. Were there all of those the parts?
I think so,
Okay.
yeah, I think those are parts of that question. I guess I had other ideas of transparency as
Oh.
well, but I think that's good, cause I think we're there, right, time-wise?
We are moving along, Tom.
Yeah, okay.
Next question is about 7 parts, but I'll try to condense it. So Great Barrington's very fortunate. We have 2 libraries. We have one in downtown and one in Housatonic. How have you supported libraries in your community where you've lived or you've been a select board member at some point? As a town manager, what are some of the ways you'd work with a library to ensure it can continue to serve as the key resource it is for the community?
Probably in 2009, Whately was facing, sometime in the late last decade, it gets fuzzy. Whately was facing some pretty significant budget issues, and there was movement afoot to close the library. And I'm a believer that a library is one of the key community centers, especially in this day and age where we're perfectly comfortable sitting in our living room in front of a screen. A library can be that place. So I worked really hard with a pretty big stakeholder group to pass an override vote that preserved the library and a number of other things. It wasn't just the library that was on the chopping block. But it was really important to have, especially because Whately doesn't have a downtown. The library is a place where you really can see people. The library and the transfer station and the post office. So we worked real hard to make sure that the town understood the benefits that the library brings for our children, for our senior population, for parents of our children, that it has opportunities there as well. My wife actually was on the library board of trustees for a while, so I have a somewhat firsthand knowledge of all this. But we also worked really closely together to say, what else can the library be? The library can provide classes on understanding technology for those people who don't have access to it. I could be dead wrong, but I don't think I'm gonna be wrong when I say that Great Barrington faces somewhat of a digital divide in terms of people with access and people without access, people with the ability to pay for monthly subscription fees and people without that ability. The digital divide still exists even in the 21st century era of technology. A library can be the place where seniors come to learn how to stay in touch with their grandchildren or to learn new things that keep them vibrant. A library can be the place where people who don't have access to the internet in their homes can accomplish greatness at the childhood level in the education thing. A library can be so many things. A library, you can have book readings. You know, Barnes and Noble shouldn't be the only organization that has book readings where somebody who wrote a book can sell 10 chapters or 10 books and read from their book. The library is, again, an asset, and creatively, with a strategic plan, we can maximize the awareness of the strengths of the library and why it should be enhanced as opposed to minimized.
So I have three very quick questions that, if I had a guess, came from a library trustee or a librarian. Do you have a library card? When's the last time you were in a library? And what's the last book you read? I may be wrong betting on this, but.
Wow. I do have a library card.
You can stay here.
Okay, what was it?
Last time in a
You were in a library.
A month ago, probably? Yeah, probably a month ago. And I have a bad habit of reading several books at the same time. The last book I finished was, actually I finished two at the same time, Hamilton, and a book called The Game, which was written by a Whately resident about the parallels of the 60s politics with the Harvard-Yale football game. Fascinating book, I encourage everyone to read it.
Should probably go to if he's got any, right?
What's that?
Ask him if he's, should we go to the last?
Let's go
You
one
wanna
more.
keep going?
Yeah, one more. We'll go a few minutes over next.
Emergency management. Extreme weather events creating emergency situations in many areas. What's your relevant experience in managing and coordinating responses to such disasters? How would you suggest improving emergency preparedness in Great Barrington?
Well, as I mentioned before, I was one of the founders of the South County EMS. We literally were having 45-minute waits for paramedic level service. And if you're having chest pains, you really don't want to wait 45 minutes for that paramedic to show up. There's an anecdote, and it'll be quick, where somebody was at a Super Bowl party having chest pains. There were 4 cardiologists at that Super Bowl party, and it still took 45 minutes for that person to get the kind of care that they can only get through an ambulance with the right medications, et cetera. So we faced a critical challenge. We confronted it head on, and we now have a management service that has 7.5-minute response times on average across a 3-town region. We are a community that faces the same challenges with ice storms, et cetera. We've had a microburst come through town. I serve as the PR person for emergency management. I do not get involved with the minutia of it because, again, I like people's lives too much, but I know PR. We had a tanker truck with poisonous gases roll over in Whately on 91 last fall, where the school had to be evacuated to the high school because it was the proximity was such. And so I have some intimate dealings with it within my skill set. And again, I haven't treated anybody because that's not my skill set. Tap into the skill sets that you have as opposed to thinking you have a skill set that you don't. One of the staff people that I met with at 4 o'clock was the fire chief. And, you know, understanding the need for, or the apparent need, again, this is superficial knowledge, of how to improve fire response. And whether that's regionalization, and he seemed very interested in the regionalization. I am a believer that public safety should be a regional approach in small town Massachusetts. I know, I would bet my last dollar that the surrounding communities, be they Monterey or Stockbridge or West Stockbridge, they all face these challenges. They're not staffed 24/7, 7 days a week. And well, maybe they should be, but how do we do that? Perhaps we have to give up a little autonomy, which is okay if it improves the service delivery. Last anecdote, I remember when we were doing the EMS thing, somebody came up to me at town meeting and said, if I'm having a heart attack, I want someone from Whately to treat me. And I looked at them and I said, and I knew this guy pretty well. I said, really? I just want to live. I said, I don't understand that answer, and I'm gonna guess you're in a vast minority. I want someone skilled and qualified, and if that means regional cooperation to whatever degree that's needed to change things around, that's a fight worth having.
So I'm gonna end this because it's a little over an hour. Do you have any questions for us?
I've had a lot of questions answered. I'm curious what you each feel is the biggest challenge facing Great Barrington right now, if I can put you on the spot like that.
I'll give a general answer. is the lack of strategic planning. In areas of growth, housing, et cetera.
Say it again, the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge facing Great Barrington,
Housing costs.
housing costs.
Yeah, long-term economic development and sustainability.
I think combining all that together is in some ways is trying to recognize the next generation of Great Barrington and what that means for our current, how we support and move together, and recognizing that they're both here.
Mhm. And I noticed no one mentioned the school and the financial challenge that's going to create.
We're done solving that, don't worry.
Okay, all right, I just want to,
Single-handedly.
Yes.
I just was curious, because that's what that's, in my mind, an incredibly, and I'm gonna use a word that I shouldn't, fun opportunity.
We've had a blast.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's been great.
With headaches.
6 years.
We have a number of infrastructure challenges ahead of us.
The Housatonic School,
Yes.
which, the repurposing of that is, again, that's strategic planning, that's what are we gonna do with this?
2 or 3 bridges and a retaining wall or 2 and some roofs.
Low-income housing.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, I.
Public utilities.
Yeah.
Public utilities,
Right.
Yeah.
big time.
Oh, come on, no,
So I want to thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming here.
All right, yeah, thank you very much.
appreciate it very much, thank you.
So
Thank you very
we will
much.
go about 25-minute break, so you can ask questions
Hey,
and
thank
leave.
you so much.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.